Once upon a time in San Francisco, there was a truly great cabaret space. It was called the Plush Room. And there, for the first time, I saw an act, well, it changed my life. And it was with a legendary actor, Charles Pierce, who performed great actresses. Today, to talk about Charles Pierce and his legacy is my dear friend and author, Kirk Frederick, author of Write That Down, the comedy of male actress Charles Pierce. Kirk, we have been friends for a long time.
Okay, good. Let's leave it at that.
I remember meeting you when I worked for San Francisco Opera, 1987.
Right.
And I'm quite sure that the first time I saw Charles Pierce, it was with a comp ticket that you gave me.
Probably.
When was the first time you met Charles?
I actually met him when we were doing Geese, the play together in San Francisco in 1969.
Right, and wait, and I have to know about this. You appeared naked on stage in the play Geese.
That's true.
So you are fully responsible for all the censorship laws we now suffer.
Actually, I was responsible for getting rid of a lot of them, I have a feeling. You know what was going on? Hair was playing across the street at the Geary Theater. We were in the little Encore Theater under the Stage Door Theater, 99-seat house, doing Geese. Very sweet play about two gay guys, and they fall in love. And by the end of the first scene, they're naked and making love. Well, that was the draw, of course. Well, the draw, it sort of faded at the end of the summer. So they decided to celebrity cast it with Charles Pierce as the mother of the younger gay guy.
Now, at this point, Charles Pierce, was he already known for doing his comedy?
He was known. He had done 6 years at a club called the Gilded Cage.
Here in San Francisco?
Downtown, the Tenderloin District.
And that was where he would actually swing out over the audience?
Yes, absolutely. As Jeanette MacDonald, the end of his show, he would swing out over the audience, doing the only pantomime he did in the show at the time, to Jeanette MacDonald, San Francisco, open your gold. And he'd swing with the frocks and the hats and the flowers. And it was a hysterical number. And people would go crazy. So, matter of fact, that number stayed in the show when we went to the City and to Gold Street and to other clubs. Couldn't do it at the Plush Room because it had a glass ceiling, literally. And so we cut that number. But Charles had been doing his nightclub act for 6 years and had perfected the art of live comedy material. Most drags were doing pantomimes and lip sync shows and all that sort of thing, and very few of them were doing live material. Charles was so funny and so quick and so brilliant that he started ending his show with live material. So that's when I came in after we worked at Geese together. It was a 6-night-a-week show. The Monday night, the dark night, Charles said, "I'm bored. I want to do my nightclub act." So he would do his nightclub act at this little theater downstairs, 99-seat house. Charles Pierce and his boys, Kirk and Peter, the guy that was playing in the show opposite me, we would dance and do Dames at Sea numbers and do comedy bits with him. So we then moved to the City. It was a nightclub in North Beach. And he did the swing number, and he started doing a lot more live material. And this is where the title comes from, because he would do so much ad-libbing, and the audience would be so with him and so clever and so new material all the time. I would be backstage getting the costumes ready for the next change, and I would hear, "Write that down." And I'd go, "Write what down?" I hadn't heard it because I was busy.
Yeah.
So I said, "Charles, there's this new thing called videotape. We're going to buy a camera and videotape your show every night, so we don't have to write that down, and we can go on doing our jobs backstage."
Right.
Well, as it turns out, it's a good thing we did that, because all those videotapes still exist in my garage. And I was able to watch them all and get all the material written down.
Before we talk even more about Charles Pierce, whom I was privileged to meet and laugh many times at, let's talk a little bit about your history, because you have a rich history here in San Francisco and a theater history. You got the wonderful Armistead Maupin, mutual friend, to write the foreword to this book. Let's talk a little bit about how you met Armistead and what your relationship was on stage, because you have a deep theatrical history, the two of you here, that I don't think a lot of people know about.
Am I allowed
Connected
to talk about it?
Yeah, Beach Blanket Babylon.
When Charles was playing a club called Olympus, America's first bisex showplace, seriously. It was the old Italian village on the same street with bimbos, and then the next block was
in North Beach, San Francisco.
In North Beach, San Francisco. Charles was playing this wonderful club, and in off the streets comes this little show that had played a summer at the Savoy Tivoli in 1974. And they needed a place to go around Christmas in 1974. Charles was doing his act at Olympus. They said, "Bring Beach Blanket in. We'll do 3 shows a night. Beach Blanket, then Charles, then Beach Blanket. Then the next night we'll do Charles, and then Beach Blanket, and then Charles." A confusing schedule at best. But Charles helped launch Beach Blanket Babylon. So after 1974, which is when this was going on, Charles was doing this show with Beach Blanket. They moved into Fugazi Hall.
Which is now there.
Still there.
Still there.
40 some odd years
The
later.
longest running musical theater piece in
Is it?
United States
Yeah,
history.
and deservedly. It's still wonderful. And so Charles felt a little bit of having fathered in and grandfathered in the Beach Blanket Babylon. So they moved to Club Fugazi. Charles went back to LA. I, because Charles was stage manager at Olympus, became the stage manager of Beach Blanket by default. Well, it was one of those things like Christmas Day, one of the guys didn't make it back after he had gone away for 3 days to go with his family, was snowed in Utah. I had to go on as the stage manager. You know, the stage manager, if somebody doesn't show up, has to go on. So I went into Beach Blanket Babylon. Well, Steve Silver, the producer, said, well, you were very good. How would you like to play the parts I'm playing? And he was doing the M&M Peanut.
Mr. Peanut.
Yes, and the Tumbling Tumbleweed, which is that's the part actually I
Invented. Yeah, I understand.
At Fugazi. And then the Tap Dancing Christmas Tree. So, cut. We go to Fugazi. We work there for, we're getting the show ready to open in July of 75. In off the street walks Armistead Maupin. Now, I had met him. He had come to see Charles at Gold Street and had come and introduced himself in 72. So he said, I would love to work here. Do you have any jobs for me? And I said, well, as a matter of fact, I desperately need a backstage manager because I'm stage managing the show, but I'm also in it. So I'm calling the show, and then I have to put down my headphones and change into my tap dancing Christmas tree outfit and go on and do my thing and then come off and get. So Armistead became my dresser.
Wow. Before Author Tales of the City.
Before Tales of the
Well, listen, before we finish this first half, we're actually going to take a look, since we've been talking about Charles Pierce. Yes. We have a video clip of him playing what I think perhaps was his most famous character, Betty Davis. So let's take a look at Charles Pierce playing Betty Davis.
Good.
I've never been so relaxed. I took a Valium a year ago.
What could you say?
Thank you.
Thank you. You know, it's funny, having watched most every Betty Davis movie ever, I have been at parties where I will quote a Betty Davis line because what gay man of a certain age hasn't pretended to be Betty Davis? And I realized I'm not quoting Betty Davis, I'm quoting Charles Pierce as Betty Davis.
It's partly why I wrote the book. Because I was doing the same thing at parties, and I was getting so much credit for that. So clever. Where'd you think of that? I said, well, it's actually a Charles Pierce line. And somebody said, well, you really should write that down. So all that happened enough that I finally said, I really need to give the man credit for what he did. He was the best Betty Davis impersonist. Well, she didn't think so.
Yeah, because did Betty and Charles actually meet?
Well, this is a story I tell in the book. So I'm not going to tell the whole thing, but she did sneak into Studio One in Los Angeles to see him once. And he didn't know it. I didn't know it till the end of the show when I was collecting the props and there she was sitting. And I said, oh, won't you please come and meet Charles? He'd be thrilled. No, thank you. He said, there's one other female impressionist who does me. His name is Arthur Blake, and he does me much better than he does. And I don't want to meet Charles. Thank you very much. No, thank you. And she was very abrupt about it. The next night we were at a big benefit and they met face to face. She didn't let on that she'd seen the show.
You hadn't told Charles?
No, I never did. I never told him because she was so, well, not nasty, but she was negative and she didn't want to meet him.
Well, she is Betty Davis.
Yeah, and so I wasn't about to either make her look bad or embarrass him, so I never told him.
Very important question, one gay man to another.
Yes.
Is it Betty or Bet?
Betty.
Betty.
She called herself Betty.
So Charles had seen every Betty Davis movie?
Oh my God, he had memorized them. You know, when he was not a working actor, he graduated from the Pasadena Playhouse as an actor in the 40s. And he didn't get much work, so he went to a lot of movies. He was an usher at the theater at Pasadena. So he
Isn't that what all acting students do?
Well,
they become
ushers?
Yes.
Yeah. And then they watch the film so much.
Yeah.
That's when Charles started saying, I can do Betty Davis. You know, you twirl your arms and purse your lips and bug your eyes and you can do Betty Davis. Anybody can. And then she was such a parody of herself. That's why I think he was lucky at a time when there were so many stars like her and Barbara Stanwyck.
Big.
And Joan, bigger than life. Marlene Dietrich and then Carol Channing and all these people that actually you could impersonate.
Right.
Or do impressions of was more accurate. Nowadays, what would you do? You know, give me your best Meryl Streep.
I mean, I don't know. What do you do?
There really aren't over-the-top actresses like there were.
Yeah.
So that's why he was lucky in those days, and he could do Bette Davis because she was so bigger than life.
Right. We've only got a few seconds left in this first segment.
Okay.
Was there an actress or a characterization that Charles ever did that just didn't work? That he said, "I tried that once. I ain't doing her again."
A couple of them, but no, for the most part, if he tried them, he'd worked on them at home. He always worked on his act. He spent almost his whole
So it only
life.
looked like it was spontaneous.
Oh, everything he did was rehearsed, pretty much. I mean, there were a lot of ad libs. No, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's a lot of very funny stuff that came out of ad libs. But he had worked on a character. When Joan Collins became so big during the Dynasty era, he thought, boy, she's over the top. I could definitely do her. So he did a couple lines that he would do in his regular sort of Celine Kendall opening act. That's what he called himself.
Yeah, yeah.
And he would do a line or two, really like, well, Joan Collins saying, all these people saying, what do I put behind my ears to attract men?
My legs.
Yes, thank you.
Ba-dum-bum
Oh,
ching.
sure, yeah, thanks, I'm here all week. So he would develop them, and then all of a sudden, they would be costumed and wigged and made up, and so they became characters. No, I think almost everything he tried worked.
All right. Well, in the second half of our interview, we're going to talk more with Kirk Frederick, author of Write That Down, the comedy of male actress Charles Pierce. And we're going to look at a little bit more of Charles's unique act, this time playing Barbara Stanwyck. We'll be right back. And we're back. Hi, this is David Perry with 10% and my continuing interview with Kirk Frederick, author of the book Write That Down, the male comedy.
You have to say it like that.
I'm sorry, the comedy of male actress Charles Pierce. Write that down.
Yeah.
Write that
You
down.
have to say, write that down.
I have been looking forward to reading this book for a long time.
It's fun.
And just during the break, looking at the pictures of the people he knew. So there were famous people who went to see his show. Joan Rivers.
Oh, yeah.
Carol Channing, correct?
Carol Channing is actually the only one that he impressioned, who ever saw him live. Well, Bette Davis. Okay, well, that's
Betty didn't like him, but
no.
Carol.
But Carol loved him. Carol actually stood up in Gold Street and said, "Well, Charles, you do me better than I do," which is very funny and very true.
Yeah.
I mean, Carol Channing is one of those people that everybody impersonates better than Carol does.
But now, Joan Rivers actually was in a movie with Charles Pierce?
No, Joan Rivers actually directed a movie called Rabbit Test with Billy Crystal, and hired Charles because somebody had taken her to see him at Studio One and said he could play the Queen of England. And I'll be darned if he didn't play the Queen Elizabeth,
right, so
who knights Billy Crystal.
I have to go find this movie tonight on Netflix. Rabbit
Test.
With Billy Crystal, Charles Pierce, directed by Joan Rivers. This is like what, 2 tomatoes on RottenTomatoes.com or something?
Oh, I don't think any. I think it's like
it's a tomato in an empty chair.
It's yeah, it's not a great film. But Charles is funny in it. I mean, the moment when he knights her and her purse flies down the arm and it gets sliced open and all the contents of the purse fly open. I mean, there's some funny stuff.
So this question just came to me sitting here. Was Dame Edna alive before Charles Pierce? Would there have been a Dame Edna without Charles Pierce?
I'm not sure. I think probably Charles Pierce paved the way a bit for her, him.
Because you called him specifically a male actress versus a female impersonator.
That's what he called himself because he didn't like being called a drag queen. He wasn't really. A drag queen is a completely different character.
Because when he was Charles didn't live the life as a woman. He was...
No, never. Oh, he would never go and drag outside of the theater.
That was a persona.
That was a persona that he created. And matter of fact, I never saw him switch. Charles would go into the dressing room 2 hours before the show, close the door. I would be setting up the show with the costumes.
So you didn't help him with his makeup and all of that?
Oh, no, never. He would never let anybody see him in transition. He went in as Charles, 2 hours later came out as Celine Kendall.
So he did it?
He did it. He did all his own makeup.
So explain to me, who was Celine Kendall?
Celine Kendall was his nom de drag. If he had a character name of the generic sort of blonde, he would get in glamour drag at the opening of the show. He was a beautiful woman. Gorgeous body, great legs, always wore very nice clothes. They said it takes a man to wear an outfit like this, some of these outfits. Have you ever seen a woman dressed like this?
Yeah.
Because he was an actor, primarily. And that's why he called himself a male actress. In Geese, when I first met him, he was playing a woman, played the mother of the young gay son, as an actor playing a woman.
Right.
Never once was there any reference to drag or him being.
Right.
It was like Shakespeare days. Men played women.
Right.
So that's just how it
Well,
happened.
it's interesting that the type of actresses you mentioned were these larger than life characters, what someone might describe as handsome women. You know, women with a certain character.
Exactly.
And certainly, I think Bette Davis, of course, was iconic of Charles. But I think another actress we have a clip of that I think he did really well, one of my favorite actresses, clearly a handsome woman, was Barbara Stanwyck.
Oh, God, yes.
So let's take a look at a clip of Charles as Barbara Stanwyck.
Who wore a long blonde wig in Double Indemnity? Barbara Stanwyck. Oh, no. Oh, no, Walter, no. Oh, no. Oh, no. Not the body on the railroad track bit again. Oh, no. Or Barbara Stanwyck in Union Pacific. Oh, no. Oh, no, Walter. Not the body on the railroad track bit again. Oh, no. She ended up on the Big Valley. Remember, Barbara? God, she was butch. I mean, where in Stockton, California, in 1860, do you find a leather slack suit? Oh, no. It wasn't leather at all. Oh, Jared, we can't lose the ranch. Go out and milk those steers. She lost her ranch anyway. Couldn't keep her calves together.
Well, you know, Barbara Stanwyck has been one of my favorites for a long time. You know, I don't know if you know this little bit of movie history. Oh, well, you probably do. Barbara Stanwyck met Robert Wagner in the movie Titanic with Clifton Webb.
Yes.
And Robert Wagner played a young boy who was in love with Barbara Stanwyck's daughter on Titanic.
Right.
But during the filming of the movie, they became lovers.
Uh-oh.
And Barbara Stanwyck was like easily 20 years older than Wagner.
Wagner.
It became such a scandal that the Hollywood, the studio system shut it down.
Shut it down?
So yeah, she was the first cougar. Barbara Stanwyck, the
Oh,
first
yeah.
cougar.
And she was so butch. she wore 2 jock straps for a bra. Another Charles Spears line. Yeah, he just was very good at imitating the over-the-top people. And like you say, sort of the more handsome women, the better.
Yeah.
Tallulah Bankhead was one of his favorites, too. I mean, always doing. And Tallulah and Betty famously didn't like each other in real life.
Right.
Like famously Joan Crawford and Bette Davis didn't like it. So Charles would do these wonderful back and forth things where he actually, as Bette Davis, would do one character as Betty and then one as Tallulah.
I remember. Yeah, there's a couple jokes that I can't tell on my show. They're just too racy. But
No.
God, there was one that involves a snake bite that I still...
It's in the book.
It's in the book.
It's in the book.
That
It's
I
hysterical.
can't tell you how many dinner parties I have enlivened with my imitation of Charles
Doing that,
imitating
yeah.
Betty Davis and Tallulah
Bankhead.
Bankhead. What was your favorite thing about Charles?
His kindness. He was just the kindest man ever. He was so generous with me. We worked together 20 years, and he was always there with money and extra this, and I'll fly you there, and we're going first class, and so generous, so loving. I say in the book, he lost his temper once in 20 years. I mean, that's incredible for a man as perfectionistic as he was and as demanding as he became about his shows and how perfect they would be. He was always so kind and so loving and so appreciative of everything.
So what was the one time in 20 years he lost it?
We were in San Diego, and a drunk guy came up to him after the show and said, "Charles, you should wear gloves. Your hands look old." And it was just one of those times when the room wasn't quite right. There was a hard night for him anyway. And just this guy saying this to Charles, he just lost it. And it's the only time I ever saw him get mad at a fan. People would say awkward, weird things to him sometimes. But this guy saying, "Your hands look old," just he lost it.
Yeah.
And, you know.
Well, that raises an interesting question. Did he ever get heckled from the stage?
Not heckled so much as people would try to finish his lines, you know, and and he would not put up with that. He would let people know right away that people didn't pay to come see you, they came to see me. And he would be as nice as he could about it, but he was pointed. I mean, if you heckled him or did anything in the audience.
But no one was ever homophobic.
Oh, no, never. No,
Because, I mean, Charles, would you have considered him someone who lived openly as a gay man?
I don't think he would have said that, but he...
But he was.
He was, openly. He just didn't live openly as a gay man.
Yeah.
He just lived openly as a performer.
Right. And he had a lot of friends in Hollywood. I mean, I remember, and this is one of those name-dropping interviews, but having a client at the Plush Room, a wonderful old singer named Hildegard, doing a show called Hildegard Live at 85, where she played the piano with gloves.
Right.
And I guess Charles knew her, and Charles came up with his best friend, B. Arthur.
Sure.
And I got invited to dinner afterwards, and I'll never forget it. Charles Pierce and B. Arthur and Hildegard. It was like, a Hollywood gay queen's fantasy. I'll never forget it.
Yes, exactly.
But he also had friends like Angela Lansbury.
Angela came to see him at the Gilded Cage in the 60s and fell in love with him and went backstage and said, I'm your new best friend. I'm going to bring everybody I know to come see your show. And she did over the years. And then, of course, Angela and B were close because they had done MAME together. And so B met Charles, and B and Charles became so close. We swore they were separated at birth. They were so similar in so many ways.
B was Butcher.
B, yeah, much.
Yeah.
And they got along famously. After they both retired, they traveled together. They went to London together a lot. They went around the United States. They were constantly having dinner parties. And so Charles had great friends in high places, and because he was a genuine guy and such fun to be around.
Right.
Talk about fun at dinner parties. I mean, he would do an occasional Betty Davis line as himself, but have the
so off stage he was fun and gregarious.
Oh yes. Oh my God, a constant laugh. I mean, I'm the luckiest guy in the world to have worked with him for 20 years and laughed for 20 years. We did nothing but laugh.
Yeah. When did Charles die?
1999 of prostate cancer. Very sad.
Yeah, and it was quiet. Not a lot of people knew about it.
No,
I remember
he didn't want anybody
reading
to
about
know.
it.
He was pretty sure everybody was going to think that he had HIV or something, and I don't know why he was nervous about that, because so many of his friends had died.
Of course,
I mean,
that age.
Having gone through the 80s was very difficult for him to be always on and always humorous. But it worked.
Yeah.
Charles, when there was no medicine to cure HIV, there was laughter. And he knew that, and he did a lot of benefits. He did a lot of money, raising money, and did a lot of good for people who were so sick they could barely roll in to see the show, and yet they would laugh and laugh and laugh. And it did us all a lot of good. I tear up about it still, because it really made him feel good that he was doing good for the community, giving back to the community that had supported him so graciously.
Well, proof that laughter is the best medicine.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Kirk.
You're welcome.
We've been speaking with Kirk Frederick, dear friend and author of Write That Down, the comedy of male actress Charles Pierce. Hi, I'm David Perry. Thanks for watching 10%. See you next week.